I've known Kevin for about a year now. We met at a local boxing gym, and although we're not exactly best friends, we get along quite well. We started training together, and it didn't take long for us to form a bond since we shared an interest in boxing. It's one of those friendships where you spend time together mainly because you enjoy the activity rather than anything else. But over time, we also started talking outside the gym. Kevin is a great guy, 22 years old, easygoing, and easy to talk to. We don't hang out all the time, but when we do, it's usually a fun time. Our conversations mostly revolve around training life or just random stuff. I don't really know much about his family, but he's mentioned his mom here and there. I didn't think much of it at the time. One evening, after an especially intense workout, Kevin asked if I could do him a favor. I usually don't get many requests like this from him, so I figured it wouldn't be anything big. "Hey man," Kevin said, looking a bit hesitant. "Can you give my mom a ride tonight?" I paused for a second, a little confused by the request. "Your mom? What's up with her?" He explained, "She works at the diner across town, and it's pretty late. I was going to pick her up, but I got caught up with some things, and I don't want her walking home this late." "I trust you, man. You think you could do it?" I thought about it for a second. I didn't really know his mom, and I wasn't sure what she'd think about a stranger, well, not exactly a stranger, but not her son's close friend, picking her up. But the situation seemed harmless, plus it wasn't far, and I could get back home pretty quickly afterward. "Yeah, sure," I said. "No big deal. I'll pick her up." Kevin's face lit up with relief. "Thanks, man. I owe you one." After a quick conversation about the details, what time her shift ended and where to meet her, I agreed to swing by the diner at around 11 p.m. As I drove there, I couldn't help but wonder what Kevin's mom would be like. I had never really given her much thought. All I knew was that she worked at a local diner and that Kevin had mentioned her a few times, but never in much detail. I wasn't expecting anything special, just a simple favor for a guy I considered a friend. When I pulled up outside the diner, I noticed that the place was nearly empty. Only a few cars were parked outside. It was past closing time, and the restaurant's lights had dimmed. I parked, turned off the engine, and waited. A few minutes later, I saw a woman walking toward the entrance. She was tall and slender, with long brown hair, tied in a ponytail. As she got closer, I realized she was Kevin's mom. Even though I had never actually met her before, I hadn't expected her to look like that. When she finally reached the car, I rolled down the window. She smiled warmly and introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Grace," she said in a friendly, calm voice. I shook her hand, feeling a little awkward, but she didn't seem to mind. Grace was, well, I wasn't sure how to describe her. I had expected someone who looked like a typical 48-year-old woman, maybe a little older, perhaps a bit worn out from working late shifts. But no, she looked incredible for her age. If I hadn't known she was Kevin's mom, I would have guessed she was around 35 or 38. She got in the car, and we exchanged some polite small talk as I started driving. The initial awkwardness quickly faded as we began chatting. Grace was easy to talk to. We talked about her job at the diner and a little about Kevin, but at first, she didn't say much about her personal life. I figured she didn't want to get into anything too serious, and honestly, I wasn't expecting much of a deep conversation. But then she opened up. "Kevin's a good kid," she said after a while, her voice softening. "Losing his dad was hard on him, and on both of us. But he's handling it well. I just worry sometimes, you know?" I didn't know how to respond at first. I just nodded, not wanting to say the wrong thing. I could tell she was a bit emotional talking about Kevin's dad, but I didn't push her to say more. She continued, "His father died in a car accident when he was little. It was tough on him, and on me too. But we're managing." I didn't know what to say to that. Losing a partner must have been incredibly difficult, and I could hear the weight of her words in her voice. But she seemed to be in a good place now, or at least she was trying to be. We talked for a few more minutes, and as we neared her house, I realized that I didn't want the conversation to end. There was something about Grace, her confidence, the way she carried herself. It was clear that she was a woman who had been through a lot, yet she still had so much warmth and positivity in her. It was hard not to feel at least a little drawn to her. I pulled up in front of her house, and she thanked me for the ride, but before she got out, she gave me a smile that lingered just a little too long. Something told me that this wasn't just a simple favor. I wasn't sure why, but I could sense that there was more to this interaction than I had initially expected. As I drove away, I kept thinking about that night. There was something about Grace that intrigued me. She wasn't just Kevin's mom, she was someone who had been through a lot in life and carried a kind of grace that made her stand out. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but one thing was clear, things weren't as simple as they seemed. A few days after that ride, I still couldn't shake the memory of that night. Nothing wild or dramatic had happened, but something about the way Grace carried herself, the way she spoke so comfortably, and the way she opened up to me made me feel like there was more to her than I had initially realized. She was Kevin's mom, sure, but she was also her own person, with her own history and experiences, and I couldn't stop wondering what else there was to know about her. The next time I saw Kevin at the gym, we had just finished a workout. He was wiping the sweat from his forehead, catching his breath, while I was trying to cool down after a tough session. "Hey, man," he started casually. "My mom thinks you're cool. She's really easy to talk to, huh?" Kevin looked up, slightly surprised by my comment. "Oh, really? You guys hit it off or something?" I chuckled awkwardly, not sure how to explain. "Yeah, I mean, she's just... I don't know. She's really different from what I expected." Kevin grinned, clearly pleased that I didn't mind spending time with his mom. "Yeah, she's awesome. She usually doesn't open up to people that easily, so I'm glad you guys got along." I wasn't sure if Kevin realized just how much his mom had opened up to me, about losing her husband, her struggles with loneliness. That was a lot for anyone to share, let alone with someone they barely knew. But there was something in her eyes when she spoke about it, like she was still carrying the weight of the past, but also like she was waiting for something new, something better to come along. A few nights later, I got a message from Grace. "Wilson, I hope this isn't too forward, but I really enjoy talking to you. You make me feel like I can truly have a conversation without being judged. I know we don't know each other well, but I'd like to learn more about you. I hope that's okay." I stared at my phone for a long moment, my heart pounding. Was Grace interested in me? I hadn't seen this coming, but now that it was here, I wasn't sure what to do with it. It wasn't something I had been looking for, especially not with Kevin's mom. I know she is a strong woman, but this is different. Should I just shrug it off, or does she actually care about me? The next day, I tried to push everything out of my mind. I went to work, did my usual routine at the gym, and kept myself busy. But no matter how hard I tried, that message kept replaying in my mind. That evening, I finally replied to her. "Hey Grace, it's no problem at all. I really enjoy our conversations. It's great talking to someone who understands me." I didn't know if that was the right thing to say. Honestly, I wasn't ready to dive into anything too personal right now. And to be completely honest, I wasn't even sure what I was hoping for. We had definitely connected, but that didn't mean it had to lead anywhere beyond friendly conversation. The next few days were a blur. We kept texting, and honestly, I felt like we were both walking on a thin line. I was trying to figure out where this could go without making things weird for either of us. It was hard not to think about her, though. Every conversation we had felt so natural, as if we had known each other far longer than just a few days. But I still didn't want to rush anything. One evening, just as I was getting ready for bed, I got another message from her. "Wilson, I hope I'm not being too forward, but would you like to grab a coffee with me sometime so we can talk more? It's completely okay if you don't want to. I just thought it might be nice." I had to put my phone down for a second. A part of me hesitated, unsure if I would be crossing a line by agreeing to meet her outside of our usual texting. But then I remembered how easy it was to talk to her, how quickly she had opened up to me in such a short time. And honestly, I was curious. I typed out a quick reply. Sure. Coffee sounds great. When are you free? We can set something up for the weekend. I couldn't believe I was actually doing this. I was about to meet Kevin's mom for coffee. But then again, we had shared so much already that it didn't feel like a huge leap. It was just coffee, right? Saturday came, and I found myself anxiously waiting at the cafe. It was a small, cozy place, nothing fancy, just a quiet corner in the city. I arrived early, hoping to gather my thoughts before she got there. I wasn't nervous. I just didn't want to say anything stupid or make her uncomfortable. This wasn't a date. This was just two people talking and getting to know each other. When Grace walked in, she looked as put together as ever. There was a quiet elegance about her that was impossible to ignore. She smiled when she saw me, and I stood up to greet her. "Hey, Wilson," she said, her voice calm but warm. "Hey, Grace." "Thanks for meeting me," I replied, gesturing toward the table. "Please, have a seat." We sat down, and at first, the conversation was light, small talk about the weather, her job, the usual things. But as we kept talking, the conversation deepened. She opened up about her life, the struggles she faced after losing Kevin's father, and how, despite everything, she kept moving forward. It was strange, but I found myself really listening. Not just talking, but actually connecting. I started to see that Grace wasn't just Kevin's mom, she was a person with her own story. And I respected her even more for that. As the cafe started to empty, we were still talking. I glanced at the time and realized how quickly it had passed. It felt like we didn't have any real agenda, we were just enjoying the conversation. At one point, Grace looked at me with a small smile, her eyes soft. "You know," she said, "I don't usually do this, meet up with people I barely know. But I'm glad we did. It's nice to have someone to talk to. To share some of this with. I haven't had that in a long time." I felt a sense of responsibility in that moment. I wasn't just here to be polite, I was actually listening. And for the first time in a long time, I understood what she meant. Sometimes, people just need someone to talk to. When we finished our coffee, I could tell she wanted to say something else but held back. Instead, she just smiled, as if she wasn't sure. "Thank you for this, Wilson. I really appreciate it," she said. "Anytime, Grace," I replied, and I meant it. We said our goodbyes, and as I walked out of the cafe, my mind was racing. It was just coffee, right? But something about our conversation made it feel different. I wasn't sure where this was going, but I knew one thing, I couldn't stop thinking about her. And I didn't want to. I was beginning to see Grace not just as Kevin's mom, but as someone I was really connecting with. And even though I wasn't ready to fully admit it, I knew something had shifted between us. There was no going back. The days after our coffee became complicated. Grace's presence left a lasting impression on me. I couldn't deny that there was something about her that pulled me in, even though I knew I should keep my distance. She was Kevin's mother, after all. And no matter how well we got along, I knew I had to maintain some boundaries. But honestly, it wasn't that easy. We kept texting, and our messages felt warmer, more thoughtful, just like our conversation at the cafe. She seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, and the feeling was mutual. But every time I replied, a voice in my head told me to slow down, to remember where this could lead. She wasn't just any woman. She was someone I had a complicated connection with. A connection that wasn't supposed to happen. Then, one evening, she texted me again. "Are you free to talk?" I felt my heartbeat quicken when I saw her name on my screen. I quickly replied, hoping this was just another casual conversation. When I called her, she answered immediately. "Hey, Wilson," she said softly. "I've been thinking about our last conversation, and I just want to make sure I didn't overstep." I could feel my pulse racing. Did she regret our coffee? Had I been too open? No, Grace. I'm glad we talked. I think it was really great, I reassured her quickly. You don't have to worry about anything. There was silence on the other end for a moment before she spoke again. I just don't want to make things awkward, she said. I'm still trying to figure out how to move forward after everything that's happened. Losing Kevin's dad, there's just a lot to process, you know? I understood. Losing someone isn't something you just get over. But I wasn't sure what my role was in all of this. Was I just someone to listen, or was there something more? I get it, I said, keeping my voice steady. But Grace, you're not alone in this. You have friends, family, and you know I'm here if you ever need someone to talk to. She let out a soft sigh, as if relieved by my words. Thank you, Wilson. I really appreciate that. It's just, sometimes I focus so much on taking care of everyone else that I forget about myself. And honestly, I don't know what to do with all these emotions. I could hear the vulnerability in her voice, and it made me want to reach out and tell her it would be okay. But I wasn't sure if that was what she needed from me. Friends gathered, but I had the feeling that everything was changing, even though none of us said it out loud. We met at a small, quiet diner on the edge of town. When she arrived, she looked naturally beautiful. Her hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she wore a simple yet elegant outfit. There was a soft glow in her eyes, something I had never noticed before, but now, it was unmistakable. As soon as she sat down, she gave me a small smile. You look beautiful, I said before I could stop myself. She smiled lightly, clearly not expecting the compliment. Thank you. I'm just trying to do something for myself, you know? I nodded, trying to keep the conversation light, but there was something unspoken between us, growing heavier. We no longer talked about ordinary things like work or daily life. Our discussions had become more personal, more real. We started talking about the past, about how life had shaped us, and where we wanted to go from here. At some point during dinner, I noticed she was looking at me differently. The way she looked at me was no longer just friendly, there was something else in her eyes, something I couldn't name. I felt my chest tighten, and I tried to push the thought away, but it lingered, pulling me back. I had tried to keep my distance. This wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to feel this way about her. But sitting there with her, I couldn't deny that there was a connection, something that had been building between us. That night, I drove her home. So, Wilson, Grace finally broke the silence that had settled between us. I've been thinking, maybe we're overcomplicating everything. I raised an eyebrow, unsure of what she meant. What do you mean? She shifted in her seat, running a hand through her hair. I mean, we keep talking about how complicated everything is. But maybe we're just two people who truly get along. I could feel the air between us shift again, the tension becoming almost tangible. Was she implying what I thought she was? Grace. I don't want to make things weird, I said, my voice slightly unsteady. This isn't something I expected. I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. She leaned in slightly, her voice softer. Me neither. But sometimes, things happen, Wilson. And you can't always control them. My heart pounded, but I still wasn't sure if I was ready to go there. This wasn't just a passing attraction or a fleeting moment of interest. It was something deeper, something that made my mind spin with the possible consequences. I care about you, Gra. The words slipped out before I could fully think them through. I care about you more than I should. But I don't want to hurt you, or Kevin. She looked at me, her expression softening. You won't hurt me. And Kevin, he just wants me to be happy. He knows how hard things have been for me. I didn't respond immediately, trying to process her words. What she said was reassuring, but there was still so much to consider. Grace took a deep breath and reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. The touch sent a jolt through me, a warmth spreading through my chest. I fought to stay composed. I think we're both scared, she said quietly. But I don't want to be scared anymore. I'm ready to see where this goes. Wilson, are you? I didn't answer right away. The question lingered in the air between us, heavy with meaning. But in that moment, I realized something. I didn't want to walk away. I didn't want to regret not taking the chance. I'm ready, I finally said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I'm ready if you are. Grace's face lit up with a smile, and I could see the relief in her eyes. There was nothing left to say. The decision had been made. We were starting something new. Something real. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't just going through the motions of life, I was truly living. As dinner ended, we stepped outside into the cool night air, feeling refreshed. As we stood by her car, she reached out and pulled me into a hug. It was no longer just a hug between friends. It was something more, something I couldn't quite explain but felt deeply. I'm glad it's you, she whispered against my ear. And in that moment, I knew this was the beginning of something beautiful. I didn't know what would happen next or how things would unfold, but I knew one thing for sure, we were both ready to explore whatever this was. And I couldn't wait to see where it would take us. It's funny how life works sometimes. One moment, you're caught in a whirlwind of uncertainty, unsure of what's coming next. And the next, you find yourself standing in a place you never expected to be, a place where everything finally makes sense. That's how I felt, sitting across from Grace on a Sunday afternoon. The warm sunlight streamed through the window, casting a gentle glow over everything. We were in her apartment, the same place she had lived for years, but today, it felt different. It felt like home. Everything between us had settled into something natural. The awkwardness that once lingered in our conversations had disappeared. We had found comfort in something real, something I couldn't have imagined just months ago. We were talking about the future now, not just the present. And it felt right. It's crazy, you know? Grace said, leaning back on the couch. I never thought this would happen. I wasn't expecting any of this. I smiled, my heart full. Me neither, I replied, my voice soft. But sometimes, you don't see what's right in front of you until it's almost too late. She met my eyes, and for a moment, we just looked at each other, silently acknowledging everything that had led us here. I'm glad we didn't let fear hold us back, Grace whispered. I was scared to start over, to open myself up again. But with you, it's different. I could see the sincerity in her eyes. I had been afraid too. But something about Grace made it easier. With her, I had found myself again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen. Truly understood. I'm glad too, I said, reaching for her hand. I think we make a great team, Grace. It feels like we've been through so much together already, even though it hasn't been that long. She gently squeezed my hand, her gaze softening. Yeah, it feels like we've known each other forever. There was a moment of silence between us, not awkward, but peaceful. As if we both understood that we were exactly where we were meant to be. No more doubts. No more second guessing. I never expected this, you know? I admitted, leaning in slightly. I thought I was just helping Kevin when I drove you home that night. I had no idea it would lead to this. Grace let out a small laugh, a playful smile appearing on her lips. Me neither. But I guess sometimes, things happen for a reason. She was right. What started as something simple had turned into something so much more. It wasn't just attraction. It was friendship. Trust. Understanding. It was knowing that we had both finally found someone we could share our lives with, someone who truly saw us. I'm glad it happened this way, I said, my voice steady. And I'm glad it's you. Grace's smile widened, and she leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to my lips. It was soft, tender. And when we pulled away, I saw the warmth in her eyes, the warmth that had been growing between us for months. I'm glad it's you too, she whispered, her voice barely audible. And as we sat there, talking about our future, I knew this was only the beginning.